Hi everyone, Pickled Dill here. Before we get into our regularly scheduled programming, I just want to take a minute to thank each and every one of you for watching, liking and subscribing. It's thanks to all of you that the channel has been able to grow in such a short time, and I can't wait to see where it will go next. To celebrate 100 subscribers, I've decided to whip up something a bit fun, and I hope you all enjoy it. But enough waffling on from me, so I'll just say this. Thank you for your support, and let's get into What If Ash Was Brandon's Son? This tale begins in the Battle Pyramid, where Pyramid King Brandon is about to face his latest challenger. However, this challenger, just like this match, is anything but ordinary. Across from Brandon stands a tall man with spiky blonde hair, who the referee introduces as Palmer. Palmer greets Brandon with great deference, calling him the mightiest of all the Frontier Brains. However, today he intends to take that title for himself. Brandon says he is welcome to try, but he doesn't plan to go down without a fight. In the audience, a boy's voice hollers his approval, causing both combatants to look up at him. Among the assembled Frontier Brains, Elite Four members, and even Champion Cynthia herself, sits a boy dressed in green khakis. He looks very bashful at this sudden attention, and his worry only increases when he sees Brandon's steely glare. The Pyramid King apologizes for his son, saying Ash has a tendency to get overexcited from time to time, but Palmer waves this off with a smile, saying he completely understands, since his own son tends to be rather boisterous. This elicits an ear-splitting screech from a boy with Palmer's blonde unruly hair, who tells his father he'll have to pay a whopping fine for likening him to that blockhead. Palmer tells everyone that this is his son Barry, and playfully tells the youth to put it on his tab, since right now he's got to focus on his battle. Barry quiets down somewhat, and the referee announces that this will be a one-on-one match. Both trainers acknowledge this, and Brandon sends out Regirock, while Palmer chooses Milotic. The battle begins with Palmer taking the offensive and calling for a hydro pump. Brandon responds with an iron defense, causing Regirock to brace itself against the super effective move. Palmer praises this strategy, but says it takes offense to win battles, calling for Ice Beam. Brandon seems unfazed by this, and tells his Pokemon to use Lock-On. Regirock obeys, allowing itself to be frozen up to its shoulders, but nonetheless locking onto its target. Palmer seems unconcerned by this, and tells Milotic to use Hydro Pump again, now that Regirock is helpless. Brandon tuts that his Pokemon are never helpless, then calls for a Hyper Beam that cuts right through the Hydro Pump. Palmer tells Milotic to dodge, and though its lithe body allows for fluid movement, the Hyper Beam circles back around and hits Milotic squarely where Regirock locked on. Milotic collapses, and the referee readies himself to declare it unable to battle, but Brandon stops him, saying he knows it still has the will to fight. Palmer agrees, and Milotic slowly rises while Regirock recharges. When both Pokemon are back in fighting shape, Palmer calls for another Hydro Pump. Brandon tells Regirock to escape, but despite its best efforts, the water move hits, shattering the ice and pushing Regirock back. Palmer flashes a grin and tells Brandon that this battle has been highly informative, but it's time to end things. Brandon says he completely agrees. Standing tall, both trainers call out their attacks in perfect unison. Palmer orders a final Hydro Pump, while Brandon switches things up with a Zap Cannon. The two attacks soar past each other rather than clashing, and hit their respective targets head-on for super effective damage. In the aftermath, there is total silence and stillness. Then both Milotic and Regirock fall unconscious. The match is declared a draw due to double knockout, and the two trainers step into the center of the arena to shake hands. Following the match is an after-party hosted by Battle Frontier owner and operator Scott. There he announces that this exhibition match had two purposes: to celebrate the start of a new season in the Battle Frontier, and to mark the reopening of the Johto Battle Frontier, right here in Sinnoh. Meanwhile, among the celebrated guests, Brandon and Palmer share a drink and discuss their mutual love of history. But all good things must come to an end, and the two men are promptly interrupted by their sons. Unlike the amicable relationship the fathers have, the sons immediately get off on the wrong foot. Ash demands Barry apologize for calling him a blockhead earlier, but Barry snaps that he deserved it, and that if his blockheaded antics hadn't put Palmer off, he surely would have won against that old geezer. This only angers Ash more. He says that Brandon may be an old geezer, but he's still his dad, which makes Brandon facepalm, while Palmer gives him a consoling pat on the back. Ash then suggests they settle this with a Pokemon battle, to which Barry agrees, saying Ash has 30 seconds to get in the ring or he'll get a massive fine. But before the battle can begin, the two young men are approached by Scott. Knowing the boys well, he greets them warmly and says that with passion like that, they should be taking on Frontier Brains, not each other. This causes both boys' eyes to light up, and they eagerly turn to their fathers, asking if they can take on the Battle Frontier. Brandon and Palmer look reluctant, but Scott goes in to bat for them, saying they're always looking for new challenges, and who better than a pair of up-and-coming young trainers, raised by their respective region's strongest frontier brains. He also adds that thanks to one of the former Johto brains going on an indefinite sabbatical, they're down to 5, and if these young men both become champions, they could become the final 2 frontier brains Sinnoh needs. This excites the boys so much that they forget their previous animosity, each declaring that they're going to become the next Sinnoh frontier brain. But this only starts a new argument over who is going to win the battle frontier first. Through some bizarre logic, they decide to settle this with a foot race around the battle pyramid, while their fathers try helplessly to say that they haven't even agreed to them taking this challenge yet. Ash and Barry seem pretty evenly matched in their foot race, making good time around the first side of the pyramid, but as they turn the corner, they unwittingly slam into a girl who has just come outside for some air. She shrieks as she is knocked over, then berates both boys, calling them those idiot loudmouths from before. Ash and Barry both protest this name, saying in perfect harmony that maybe the other is an idiot, but they certainly are not. This only makes the pair glare at each other, but the girl tells them to stop squabbling and help her up before she gets dirt on her clothes. The boys obey and apologize for knocking her over. She accepts their apology and introduces herself as Caitlin. Ash says it's nice to meet her, while Barry mutters he's sure he's heard that name somewhere, but he just can't place where. Caitlin tells them it's not important, and that she overheard from Scott they might be taking on the battle frontier. Both boys puff out their chests and declare their dream to become powerful frontier brains like their dads. Caitlin says that to be a frontier brain, one must have brains, like the name suggests, and that as it stands, they don't have a brain between them. So for their own sake, she had best come with them and keep them out of trouble. Barry protests he doesn't need a nursemaid, while Ash delightedly says it's settled, pulling each of his new companions into a headlock hug. Back inside, Scott has finally talked Brandon and Palmer into allowing Ash and Barry to do the challenge. Each father takes their son aside to tell them to be careful and remember what they've taught them. Brandon also has another message for his son, saying that the Sinnoh region is steeped in legend, lore, and history, and to keep up his studies while on the road. Ash promises to do just this, saying the special Pokemon they caught together will definitely help him in that endeavour. When the group reunite, Scott tells them the nearest facility is Thornton's Battle Factory, just past Sunny Shore City, which isn't too far from their current location at Lake Valor. Ash and Barry thank Scott for this information and depart, meeting up with Caitlin, who was mysteriously absent from this meeting with Scott and the Frontier Dads. The trio make their way along Route 222, but since it was already evening before they left, they don't get very far. Caitlin is affronted when Ash and Barry tell her they're going to be camping, and she refuses, demanding they keep going until they reach civilization. Ash says he thought she knew there'd be camping involved in a journey, but she retorts that her version of camping is a hotel with less than 5 stars. Barry rather tactlessly jokes that she's in luck, since they're sleeping under way more than just 5 stars, which causes Caitlin to call him an idiot, commandeer his sleeping bag, and set up camp away from the boys. They're all woken the next day by a booming voice that cries, "Live from Sunny Shore City!" The trio look for the source of the noise and find a small, multicolored flying-type Pokemon with a long protrusion from the back of its head. All having knowledge of Pokemon thanks to their upbringings, they recognize it as a Chatot, with Barry declaring his intention to catch it. Barry calls out his partner, a Piplup, who shakes itself awake, then prepares to face its opponent. Chatot recognizes the challenge and opens with a peck. Piplup gets hit, and Barry yells for Piplup to show off its own peck. Piplup does as it's told, turning the match into a back-and-forth barrage of pecks between avian Pokemon. When it seems like neither Pokemon will take the lead with this strategy, Barry tells his Piplup to use Bubble Beam. Since Chatot was expecting another peck, this point-blank attack catches off guard for extra damage. It also creates the opening that Barry needs to throw a Pokeball. The ball shakes 3 times, then stops, bringing Chatot into the fold. Barry delightedly brings out his new Chatot, who approaches Piplup and shakes its wing in a gesture of mutual respect for a battle well fought. Meanwhile, Caitlin comments that Barry's a bird brain for catching another small bird Pokemon when he already has one. This infuriates Barry, who demands Caitlin pay a fine for such an insult. Caitlin does not take kindly to this, going very quiet and saying that if he ever threatens her with a fine again, she will use her psychic powers to shred his little mind. In this state, he will be nothing but a hollow husk, incapable of thought or feeling, while whatever small piece of what was once his self-identity wanders a void of endless darkness for all eternity. She then turns to Ash and says they best get going if they want to reach the battle factory today. Ash and Caitlin get back on the road, while Barry stays rooted to the spot, unsure if Caitlin really has the psychic powers to carry out her threat, but is too afraid to find out. The trio make their way to Sunny Shore without any problem, though it seems Chatot heard Caitlin call Barry a bird brain, and so continuously calls him this, until he puts it back in his Pokeball to shut it up. When they arrive in the city, Caitlin and Barry want to stay for a while to check out the sights, which Ash reluctantly agrees to, seeing as how he's outvoted. The trio spend some time at the Sunny Shore markets, where Caitlin is able to buy a fancy tent, and the lighthouse where they see Pokemon Rock through a set of coin-operated binoculars. At this point, night has fallen, and they decide to spend the night at the Pokemon Center. Here Chatot and Piplup are healed, along with Caitlin's Ralts, even though it didn't battle. However, when asked whether Ash would like to have his Pokemon healed, he declines, saying it's better to let his partner keep slumbering in its ball. This intrigues Caitlin and Barry, with Caitlin snapping that if this is his attempt at being mysterious, it's just coming off as annoying, while Barry relentlessly prods Ash, telling him to show him his Pokemon right now. Ash shakes his head, saying he can't. He reveals that his Pokemon is exceptionally rare, and that his father told him not to go around showing it off, since Pokemon are partners, not trophies. Caitlin understands, but Barry only gets more agitated now that he knows it's a rare Pokemon. His demands to see it get more vehement, and Ash finally shuts him down with a "No!" worthy of his father. He then tells Barry he can see it tomorrow in his battle with Thornton, but for now he has to be patient. The next day, the trio heads south from Sunny Shore, and it only takes them about an hour before the battle factory comes into view through the tree line. Reinvigorated, Ash and Barry sprint towards their goal, while Caitlin yells she can't run in these shoes, and the guys are jerks for abandoning her. In no time flat, Barry and Ash arrive at the battle factory and are greeted outside by Thornton himself. He welcomes the two challengers, saying he is sure to glean plenty of valuable data from battling the sons of two frontier brains. He then asks which of them is going to battle him first. For once, Barry has a practical solution to this quandary, showing off the Poketch on his wrist, saying that they can use the coin flip app and flip for it. Ash agrees, and Barry calls Tails, saying Tails never fails. It immediately lands on heads. Thornton welcomes Ash as his first challenger, while Barry sulks, declaring Ash must have hacked the app, since Tails never fails. The three young men then step inside, with Barry heading for the stands, while Ash and Thornton enter the arena. As they take their places, a slit opens in the floor, and a metal tray containing rings of various sizes rises up in front of both Ash and Thornton. Thornton explains that this is the special condition of his facility, and that these rings are called battle bands. He demonstrates by taking one of the bands and clipping it around his waist. He then tells Ash to do the same, and also put one around his Pokemon. He will only need to do this once, however, since their battle will be a one-on-one. Ash asks what the function of these bands are, and Thornton gives him a condescending sigh, saying he was just getting to that. He then points at a number of screens high above them, and tells Ash that occasionally trivia questions will appear on screen. Either of them can attempt to answer these questions, and if they are the first to get them correct, their Pokemon will gain a benefit from the band, such as increased power. However, if they get them wrong, both trainer and Pokemon will be electrocuted. Ash says that sounds a bit harsh, but Thornton dispassionately says he's welcome to ignore the questions if he wants, since there's no penalty for silence. Only wrong answers and stupidity are punished in his battle factory. Ash accepts these terms and says he's ready. Thornton brings out a Bronzong, clipping a battle band to its bell-shaped body, then tells Ash to do the same. At last, Ash brings out his Pokemon, and to everyone's surprise, it's small and rather blobby. With a body of liquid metal, a golden hexagonal nut for a head, and a single black eye, it is unlike any Pokemon the assembled group have ever seen. Thornton calls for the Battle Factory's computer to scan it, but the results come up inconclusive. Ash explains that his Pokemon is called Meltan, and it was said to have vanished thousands of years ago. However, one day, while exploring a ruin in Kanto with his father, Ash came across the little Pokemon, and they become fast friends. Since then, they've been a team, but this is their public debut, because Brandon always feared people would try to steal what is perhaps a one-of-a-kind Pokemon. Thornton calls Meltan a fascinating specimen, and when Ash fits it with the smallest battle band available, he announces that it's time for the battle to begin. At once, Bronzong and Meltan rush into the center of the ring, while a trivia question appears on screen. Magikarp evolves into what Pokemon? Ash knows this one, but Thornton is quicker, saying the answer is C, Gyarados. The screen chimes, and a soft humming emerges from Bronzong's battle band, as it seems the benefit from the answer was a speed boost. The increased speed allows it to get ahead of Meltan and hit it with a heavy slam before the smaller steel type can attack. Meltan is slammed into the ground, but thanks to its typing, it manages to resist what might have otherwise been a finishing blow. Nonetheless, Ash tells it to show Bronzong its own strength with a headbutt. Meltan gets back up and rockets at Bronzong, hitting it and causing it to ring like a gong. Meltan then backs up, and Ash calls for a Thundershock, while Thornton orders a Gyro Ball. The two attacks clash in midair. Just then, a new trivia question appears on screen. True or false, Torterra is the heaviest starter Pokemon. Both trainers call true, but once more, Ash is just a little too slow, granting Bronzong with an attack boost that pushes its Gyro Ball past Thundershock and into Meltan. Meltan is sent skidding back, and Ash can see that it's looking worse for wear. He asks if it can keep going, and the tiny Pokemon nods its metallic head yes. Ash then calls for another headbutt, which Meltan does with a running leap. However, this is a trap by Thornton, who says that now Meltan is in close to finish things with another heavy slam. The attack connects, and Meltan hits the dirt, while up above, the screen begins beeping and flashing. Ash asks what this means, and Thornton says the battle band can sense that Meltan is near the end of its rope, so they're about to enter the lightning round. Ash asks what this is, and Thornton explains it is a series of rapid-fire questions, all centered on a single theme, with more powerful benefits and harsher punishments. The beeping stops, and both trainers look to the screen as it displays the theme of this lightning round: legends and lore. The first question appears on screen. How many eyes does each of Hoenn's legendary titans possess? Both Ash and Thornton yell their answer, and while Thornton says 8, Ash says 7. There is a pause while they wait to see who is right, before Ash and Meltan's bands ping and a yellow light activates on each, while Thornton and Bronzong's shock them. This frazzles Thornton, who mutters that he's never gotten a question wrong before, and how did Ash know that when he didn't? Ash replies that back home he's in charge of the Reggie's grooming, so he's seen those eyes enough times to know how many there are. Thornton says no matter, calling for another Gyro Ball. Meltan leaps back, narrowly avoiding the attack, and then the next question appears. Before it was known as Sinnoh, what was this region called? Ash knows this one too, but this time Thornton doesn't try to cut him off, perhaps afraid of another shock. Ash says the answer is Hisui, and their battle band pings again, with a second yellow light turning on. This causes Thornton's composure to crack further. With him yelling at Bronzong, they can't allow Meltan to get all 3 lights. A similarly worried Bronzong nods and begins charging a giant Gyro Ball. Thanks to the yellow colour of the lights on the band, and the use of the term lightning round, Ash tells Meltan to meet it with a Thundershock. Thanks to the recent boosts Meltan received from the 2 right answers, it and Bronzong's attacks clash perfectly as the last question appears on screen. The screen reads, final question, double points. What is the name of the electric-type member of Kanto's legendary birds? Both trainers scream, Zapdos! With barely a millisecond between them, and there is silence while the computer calculates who answers first. After a pause that seems to last forever, where the only sound is Gyro Ball and Thundershock still clashing, a soft ping is heard. Both trainers look down to see if their band is lit up, and Ash sees that his has all 3 lights blazing. Thornton howls as a pulsing noise comes from Meltan's band, and then the tiny steel type is engulfed in a crackling yellow aura. Meltan looks back at its trainer, and when their eyes meet, it is clear what they must do. With a resounding voice, Ash calls for Meltan to put all its new power into the Thundershock. At once, the aura surrounding Meltan flows from it and charges down the electrical current. For a second, it almost looks like Meltan has summoned Zapdos itself, as the newly empowered attack obliterates the Gyro Ball and slams hard into Bronzong. Bronzong is sent flying, and when it hits the back wall, it is clearly unconscious. Ash is declared the winner, and Thornton takes this loss badly, yelling that Barry was right. Ash must have hacked the Poketch and then his computer, since there's no way he'd get a trivia question wrong, and there's absolutely no way he'd lose to a novice like him. Tears fill his eyes as he screams that Ash is a cheat, and therefore disqualified. Ash wants to protest this, but another voice gets in before him. Caitlin has arrived at last, and she tells Thornton that for a man of logic and reason, he is acting like an emotional child. Thornton snaps at her to shut up, but then Caitlin gives him a look that clearly means something and scares Thornton back to his senses. With a gulp, Thornton reluctantly hands over the factory print, a metallic rectangular image of the battle factory, roughly the size of a credit card. He also gives Ash a frame with 5 indentations, sized for these prints, and says that once he's filled all 5, Ash will be the master of the Sinnoh frontier. And that's where we'll leave things, with Ash hot off his first victory. Will Barry have an equally smooth first match with Frontier Brain Thornton? And what is this strange connection between Caitlin and Thornton that made the young man change his tune so dramatically? Find out all this and more when the journey continues.